What's going on, everybody? So today we have the privilege to have the Gideon Assefa here with us.
What's up, guys?
Just to give you guys a little background on Gideon, he's originally from New York, plays keys, but is mainly known for his aux game, his aux situation. So that's what we're going to talk about here today. All right, so I had asked a couple people on Instagram to ask some questions. So I'm just going to read, and then from there we will kind of just go wherever. So, all right, the first question that somebody asked is, what exactly is aux?
Okay, so aux keys means auxiliary keys, which means supplementary or supportive. It's kind of like a supportive role, basically. And basically what that means is anything that's not typical, any sound that could be sample-based or synth-based that is on the platform. For example, a piano is a piano sound. A drum is going to be a drum sound. A guitar is going to be a guitar sound. Maybe a little different. Guitars is, they have a lot of flexibility depending on your tone and how you color things. Bass is going to be bass, Organ is going to be organ. Aux keys or synth or auxiliary keys, it's not just one thing. It could be many things. Even in one song, it could be many different things. So that's really where it fits in terms of a band.
When it comes to aux, what's better to have? Laptop or hardware gear?
Well, it depends. That's kind of like what's better to have? Have you ever heard the saying, there's apples to apples, or apples to apples, and then apples to oranges, and then there's like apples to hammers, which is like something that's completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do I get a blue Toyota or a red Toyota?
Yeah.
Do I get a blue Toyota or a red Honda?
Yeah.
Do I get a blue Toyota, or do I move closer to the city and not buy a car at all? It's just completely different. So in every keyboard, you have three components. You have a MIDI controller, you have an interface, and then you have a brain, which is like where all the sounds are. So on any, like if you look at a Motif, a Korg Kronos, a Roland Phantom, you have the MIDI controller, which is the keyboard, and then you have the brain, which is where all the sounds are, somewhere on the keyboard, and then the interface, which is where you plug the cables in. So those three parts are on a keyboard. Now when you have a laptop, you're going to have those same three things: a MIDI controller, the brain is going to be the laptop, so that's going to be a separate area, and then the interface, which can be a completely different. Some people get they get really cheap interfaces. Some people get really, really expensive interfaces. It does the same thing. So these three components are all on one keyboard. So I'm gonna give you an answer that you may not like to hear. It's preference, and preference because of style, because of what is needed. If I go on Instagram, I can see a lot of gospel musicians have multiple keyboards, I'm talking about like three over here, they got two over here. And on top of that, I see some CCM guys, they'll have, like, who's playing auxiliary keys. They'll have two keyboards at most, two laptops at the same time running two different things, but they're ran out of their interface. They'll run into like a synthesizer and then they'll run it out of the synth, like a effects module. If it's whatever it could be, it could go into like a reverb, and so now you get into like guitar pedals, and so it's literally a preference. My question to that person would be, what do you need? What do you need to cover? So I mean, that's a big rabbit hole. Me personally, if it's about just ease, then I would just have a keyboard. If it's just about what's the easiest thing, it's keyboard. If I'm gonna say what's the cheapest thing, it's still a keyboard. But if you have money, if your budget's a little bigger, it's actually cheaper to get a laptop and an interface and like something like MainStage.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's a big rabbit hole, but that's a great question though.
Yeah. This kind of has to do with what you just talked about and how you broke it down. Somebody said, how do you control your levels? What's a good mixer or mixes to make sure that all your sounds are leveled? Which I know for me, that's something that when I run my VSTs through like my Ableton or whatever it is, it's kind of a process of making sure that, okay, my first sound isn't here in levels and my second sound is here. So I guess that's what they're asking, like, how do you level your sounds? Like, is there a mixer or your interface? How do you go about that process?
Okay, so that's great. Great question. There's kind of a process that you're gonna have to do on your own, and I'll tell you what my process is. So basically, after I figured out all the sounds, let's say if I have 8 sounds, and I go to my loudest sound, and then I use my loudest sound in the loudest kind of way. So I'll play the thing. Basically, I'll create the loudest amount or the most volume that comes out of my rig. I'll go there, and that's my highest point. So whatever that is, that'll be my 0, okay? So if that's really loud, then I'll bring it down, and everything else will be basically matching that. So then I'll go to my softest sound, and if my soft sound is really, really soft, then I'll bring the volume up. But now you have a few variables like cutoff. Cutoff is a low pass filter, and it brings the highs out. So when you open up that filter, it's volume wise, you're gonna hear more volume because you have more things that are coming through that sound. So it's gonna get louder. So you have to account for that as well. Mm-hmm. But when you open up that filter all the way, is that volume at your max volume basically?
That you would mix.
Yeah, so you would have to, honestly, I would listen and try to use the metering on, on whatever, if you're using a computer, if you try to use that metering that's on the host program. If you're using a DAW, which is a digital audio workstation, if you're using that, try to use the metering on that, or on the VST, which is the virtual instrument, try to see the metering on that. But if you're using a keyboard, you can still try to use the metering on the keyboard if it has metering. I know some keyboards do, but if not, try to work with your sound person to see, like, hey, I need to bring this sound up and this sound down, because some keyboards do have parameter mapping.
So to give you guys a little background story on the people that don't know Gideon, Gideon has done multiple live recordings for James Wilson, Draylen Young. He went to IBC where he played in Praise. He's done North American Youth Congress, so he's done tours. So he kind of has had a lot of experience dealing with aux. This question kind of hits the nail on the head, which is what I want to talk about. So the question is, what's your process of selecting sounds for original music? Why and when do certain sounds work? How do you go about all of that?
Okay, that's a great question. Great question. Then again, this is my process, and I'll tell you how I got there. But basically, on an original song, I always take what is the meaning of the song, and then I take the meaning of the song, and then I say, okay, what is a sound that can mean that? For example, if I were to play strings, for example, strings are very like a beautiful instrument. You could play strings with a violin, viola, cello, contrabass, or double bass, or whatever you want to call it. They're played in different ways. Whether it's the bow or it's plucked, the strings are played in different ways. So when you play strings, you have to understand how you're going to play those strings. So if I'm on a keyboard, there's 2 variables called attack and release. I'm going to have the attack down, and I'm going to have the release open. So this way, as soon as I press the chord, it swells in, and then the release, when I let go, basically, it'll still kind of be there after. And you can't do that always, because it kind of muddies up the mix or your channel. But to make the strings on a keyboard sound really nice, that's something to do. But the reason why I play strings is to really magnify or amplify what the vocals are singing. Another instrument, it's more like I would think about like majesty, or if I'm going to talk about quality of God that's like super grand, I would most of the time use strings. If I were to use something like bells, bells would mean like I'm going to bring attention to the thing that the vocals are singing, and so I want you to hear exactly what it's singing. Sometimes I also use bells like with the whole association thing. It's like not just, so there's glockenspiels, and then there's like actual like bells. And so, glockenspiels sound more like the thing that you would hear if you were a baby, like the toy da 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 da. That sounds more like a glockenspiel. So when you play that, it's bringing people back to their childhood. So it's like there's a song from Brian and Katie Torah called what is it called? Let There Be Light. No, I don't think that's the one. All creation knows that you alone are God. Let our voices. Anyways, I don't remember the name of the song, but on the bridge section they have bells. Now, like synth brass is the thing that a lot of gospel people use. Synth brass, whether it's synth or synth brass. So synth stands for synthetic, which means it's not sample based. There's two kinds of sounds. So sample based means that it's actually in the real world. It's a tangible instrument that was mic'd and they, put it into a library and they could change, the parameters or whatever, but it's actually a real world instrument. You can touch the thing, sample based. Synthetic based means it's made on a computer and it doesn't exist. You can't actually touch that sound. Oh, you could touch the keyboard that it was made on, but in the 80s, that's when all that stuff came out. So gospel music uses a lot of synth brass. Brass is like sample-based instrument, but it's affected with the synth side of things. So like a lot of like the high energy gospel songs that you hear will have a synth brass, and they'll, there's different kinds of sine waves. There's sine, there's sine waves, saw waves, FM waves, there's noise, there's triangle. So all those waves basically make a different kind of sound, and there's oscillators. It's like a deep world. But the synth brass thing, if you guys can like understand, like in the 80s, that's when all that stuff came out. So if you want to have a high energy song, but you don't want it to sound 80s, where do you find that in history, basically? Most of the time, if I want to use a sine wave, it's a little softer. So it's because it goes like this, goes like that. So there's no real hard edges. So I may use that as a kind of like a filler, but like something like a saw, it looks like that. And I'll use that for like a super, super high energy moment, or I'll use that for like a lead line, or like any like for example, Endless Praise, I'll do that. Now on the bridge of Endless Praise, they use a Moog, which is a sine wave. So it's, you can break the rules. It's not just rules, it's just kind of preferences. But let me go ahead and move on to another kind of sound. There's pads. Pads is under the umbrella of pads, there's like soundscapes, and then there's textures. So soundscapes is like more ambient things, and it's more like things that are distant in the background, but kind of set the mood for the whole song. And it could be like reverbed out, it could just be super in the back, but textures is more like it's like maybe fuzzy things, more like it's like, if you walk into a house and you see the sun walking, shining through the window or something like that, and you see like the dust in the air, that's like what a texture would be. But imagine that same kind of scenario, but on a song, So it's you gotta kind of use different things in the world to help you with your sound. And let me tell you, you're not wrong. It's not like a right or wrong thing. It's always a preference thing. So,
what's your favorite synth to work with? I don't know what that means. Maybe the synth type, or maybe like a
synth. I mean, okay, so if I were to say library, it would definitely be Omnisphere. Omnisphere would be like favorite type of library of sounds would be Omnisphere.
Okay, so then that brings somebody else's question. They asked, hold on, I just lost it. Okay, what are some Omnisphere sounds that you recommend?
The one that everybody's on right now is Kilowatt Funk. That's the one that everybody's on. Two sounds that I really like using is Old School Brass 1 and 2. Those are really good ones. Everybody knows about trying to think, Fade to Green, Phoenix Rising. There's a few good ones. I mean, there's Power Strings, which is a great string sound. One that I really like is Stars. Stars of the Light or something like that, or Stars. I forget the name of that sound. Anyways, there's so many different sounds, but the one that everybody uses a lot is Kilowatt Funk, and it's really good to layer. So try that one out.
All right, next question. Let's get into this one. And I'll add a little to it. The question is, what's your aux setup? And then let's do what's your dream aux setup. Let's put away money. Let's put about like if money was no issue, somebody came up to you and was like, hey, I'm cutting the record, whatever you want, we can afford. So
okay, so the whole thing about like an aux key setup is that really what you're paying for is the sound. So the sound is like the most important part. So like for James's album, for example, I had a MIDI controller that had a hole on the bottom of it, and I dropped it, and a piece broke on the platform during practice. And everybody said, ooh. And then I played it on Hina Mato, and it didn't give me no problems because it doesn't matter about the MIDI controller. It matters about the sound. So, I mean, obviously, it'd be great to have like multiple keyboards, but you got to start with a great product, basically, which is Omnisphere, you know, is what I use.
Yeah.
And then actually out of Omnisphere, I had 2 instances of Omnisphere. I had 2 laptops, and one keyboard had one setup, basically. So that was my setup. If I had a dream setup, I would get a whole bunch of guitar pedals, and I would get a preamp, and I would get so out of a keyboard comes 4.4 decibels, so plus 4.4. So like when you hook in a keyboard into the sound system, it's going to be louder than an interface. So an interface, like there's a Persona's interface that goes to negative 35 dBs. And if you spend more money, you can get the same interface, but the preamp's in it a little better, so it goes up to negative 10.
Okay.
You still got more to go to get to, plus 4. So basically, if you can, spend money on getting a good interface, getting good samples, like or synths, or like a good plugin like Omnisphere, and then after that, a good keyboard that you like the feel of, So that's what I would do.
Okay, that's great. All right, my big brother Aaron Barbosa asked this one. So Aaron, if you're watching, we love you, man. He said, Gideon, my man, what are some sounds that I should use if I want a Todd Delaney feel bell lead stuff? So what are some Todd Delaney type sounds for bells and leads, or bell leads?
Bell leads, yeah. Okay, so the one that I'm using right now that we actually used for a song for James was, and it's actually, what was his name from Colombia?
Alexis Messina.
Okay, so he's the one who got me on this sound. Love the sound. It's called Octa Bell, which is one word, and then lead. So Octa Bell lead. Love that sound. There's one that Julian really liked. It's called, what was the Christmas bell lead?
Christmas Layers.
Christmas Layers. Great sound. One that I like is called, I actually got this from multitracks.com, is what they use on the Hillsong tour. It's called N dot or hashtag N dot O dot N dot Glock. So it's No Other Name is what the Glock that they use on the song No Other Name. So I would say go ahead and start with the Octabell leads. There's a category in Omnisphere that has those leads. So I'm using Omnisphere. Aaron, if you're watching this, it's the bells in that are really, really good. And there's some bell leads, if you consider it that term, that are similar to Octabell lead. There's like the first like 30, I think. They're all kind of around the same idea, but that one's really good. So I think you should try that one. Yeah.
All right, that's good. This will probably be our last question. If not, we'll segue into other stuff. But if somebody's just beginning to play aux, let's say they got asked to play at their church, or they got asked to play for a conference, like beginner level aux, what would your advice be? Or even to yourself, like when you began doing aux, like if you could talk to yourself from the Gideon now to the Gideon that began maybe at IBC or whatever it was, what advice would that be when it comes to being a member of the band and playing aux?
Okay, biggest piece of advice that I wish that I had, which is really hard to hear and also really hard to do, is to push your equipment to its limit. There's number one, like fail proofing your stuff, because aux keys most of the time, if you have a keyboard, you're good. You plug it in, you're fine. You have a laptop though, that's another variable. Seeing like if the laptop is hooked up to the Wi-Fi and then you get a phone call during the service and then the phone call is going through the sound system, like stuff like that.
I've seen that happen.
Like check for stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like fail proof it. try to see like, oh, is my computer gonna crash? Like, why is it gonna crash? How many sounds did I just run to make my computer crash? Or is my hard drive okay? Should I be putting the sounds on a different hard drive?
Yeah.
Like, you don't have somebody to tell you stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's very important, because if you don't have that, then you're gonna be out somewhere without a laptop, no sounds, and you're gonna have a MIDI controller that has nothing on it.
Yeah.
So there's honestly that. And the second thing I would tell them to do is don't think that what you're doing sounds like trash. Like, it may sound like trash, and you could be very, very critical of yourself.
Yeah.
But like, you have to understand, like, sometimes the term is like, you feel like you're not doing enough, because really where aux keys is supposed to fit most of the time when they're doing lead stuff is in like the high mid register, you know, and that's like where the guitars hang out. And so when you're up there, you feel like, man, if you're a piano player, like, man, I'm not playing nothing low end. I feel like it's very like thin, and I'm not cutting in, or, you know, but that's exactly what you're supposed to be. So just be confident in your lane, and then stay in your lane. Don't try to play bass, because when you have a bass player, they'll get mad at you. Don't do this, like, you know, whatever this is when you play. Don't do that. Play, you know, if you're gonna do it like this. Most of the time, one hand. You know, get your hand on the modulation wheel. See what that does. Like, affect parameters. Don't be afraid of that, because honestly, it's not gonna break. If the program is set to do that, then like, you need to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
So reverse engineering.
Okay. What would you say your beginner aux patch would be? Like, you know, going back to like a beginner aux player that's like, hey, like, I have to play for this conference, or I have to play at my church, or this concert, or whatever it is. What would you say, like, okay, try to build your patch that have these foundational sounds, like these basic sounds, that if you have these sounds, for the most part, you'll be good. What would those sounds be to have like in your patch?
Okay, I'll do it like two ways. So two performance patches. One for CCM, one for gospel.
Okay.
And there'll be 4 sounds a piece, so 8 sounds total. So for the first patch, for the gospel patch, number 1, a synth brass. Okay. Number 2, bells. Number 3 are Rhodes. And then number 4, probably do strings.
No pad? In the gospel setup?
No pad. No pad. Because if you're gonna play, like, for example, that's sound that I was talking about, kilowatt funk. If you turn the cutoff down,
turn into a pad.
I mean, you're playing a pad basically. Just use a sustain pedal. The only difference between a pad and turning the cutoff down on a synth brass sound is that when you let go of the synth brass sound, most of the time it's gonna stop. Yeah. But on a pad, when you let go, it's the release. You got a little bit left, you know. So those are the 4 sounds. You got synth brass, bells, Rhodes. So I'm not talking about a cloud. I'm just talking about something warm. Yeah. Just because, like say on the verse of Greater Things, which I wouldn't even consider that a full gospel song. It's like a contemporary gospel. Right. The main keys player is playing Rhodes. If you have a main keys player who's going to be playing main keys on the verse that there is no piano on, then play the Rhodes. And then lastly, strings to help those like moments, especially like King of Glory. That'd be a great song. Yeah. It's still contemporary gospel, but anyways, CCM, I would do number 1, I would do pad. Number 2, I would do bells. Number 3, I would do like a synth lead. Something that could be polyphonic, but so basically not monophonic, which means like if you play one note, if you play a different note, you can only play one note at a time. So polyphonic means you can actually play 2 notes, and it'll play the 2 notes. I
didn't know this, but there's like in most keyboards and even the most like Omnisphere, you can change.
You change it, yeah.
Yeah, like I always thought it was just like this sound is monophonic and I can't change. Like you can go into the settings and change it to polyphonic.
So the thing about that is that if a sound is monophonic, you have to make sure that when you try it, you're in your room by yourself, not on the platform. Right?
Yeah.
Because that happened to me. The first time it actually happened to me, I was like, oh, I found that button. I just changed this monophonic sound to polyphonic. I played a chord and it said, distortion, program shuts down, computer restarts. So like, don't do that. And I promise, it'll catch you, you know, and I didn't have the best computer in the world, but so the 4 sounds for CCM, I think I said pad. And then I said, did I say bells? Second, I think I said bells. Then I did a synth that's polyphonic. So not necessarily synth brass.
Like a synth lead?
Like
kind
that can be a synth lead, but that's polyphonic. But something that's really bright, that's up front, that something that has like an attitude problem. You know what I'm saying? Like something that's really up there, because you can change those parameters, for example, with cutoff. And then lastly, I would probably do, I don't know. Right now trumpets are in, like muted trumpets are in, but I don't know a good plugin that has muted trumpets.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'd probably go ahead and put strings on there too, because you want the wind from the bow of the string to be in your sound, and that'll bring that memory association to like majesty and stuff. So, but the thing about horns is like there's the whistle from the horn, and that's the memory association to like victory. That's what they used to blow before battle. So you may put a horn in there and hide it in a pad or something. I heard Hillsong do that one time. So, anyways.
Okay, that's kind of, I'm gonna start using that now where I play aux. Those are gonna be my setups. Is there anything else you want to say, like, at all? Anything?
Yeah.
In regards to aux?
Yeah, you don't need Omnisphere to play aux keys. Just to let you know, I mean, I have Omnisphere. I think when I bought it was like $479. It's a lot of money. You could get main stage. It's $30.
Yeah.
Get a MacBook. You could buy it used. Don't kill yourself to try to play aux keys. You don't need all this stuff. But just get something and then start there and then just learn, And as you learn, you'll figure out how to do stuff. But make sure you're doing stuff. Make sure don't just say, oh, because I don't have everything I need, then I can't do anything. Like, don't say that. If you're in this position and if you're watching this video to learn, it's because God trusts you with that position, and He needs you to play aux keys at your home church. Or if He's asking you to play it for youth, it's important that you do it. And getting better is something that will happen as time goes on. So don't worry about that. Like, you can worry about it, but like, don't worry about it.
Yeah. Be patient with yourself. That's outside of aux keys. That's musician 101. Be patient with yourself.
Yeah. So that's it. Yeah.
That's it.
All right, man. It was fun.
I'm glad you did it.